Every morning at precisely 7:42, the train to the city arrived on platform 3. The metal screeched against the tracks, doors sliding open with a sigh like it, too, was tired of this routine. So was I. And yet, I needed it. I always boarded through the second car, third door, and took the window seat on the right. The corner where the sunlight hit gently but not directly, where the world outside passed like a moving watercolor. But mostly, I sat there because of him. He always came in just a few moments after me. Quiet. Soft steps. Headphones slung around his neck, not on. Same black coat. Same slouched posture. Same tired eyes. He sat across from me. Not directly diagonally, like a quiet echo. Window seat. Left side. Never once looking up. He was the boy who never spoke. And I couldn't stop watching him. Not in the obvious way, never. He didn't like eyes on him, that much was clear. There was something sacred in his silence. Something gentle. He looked like someone who'd been hurt in loud ways and healed in quiet ones. I admired that. While the rest of the train fumbled with coffee cups and loud phone calls, he sat still. Like a painting. Like the world could pass around him, and he'd stay untouched. I brought my notebook every day not because I always had something to say, but because it gave me something to hold. Something to do while pretending not to care that he was just a few feet away. But I did care. More than I should have. I never knew his name. Never knew where he was going or what he was listening to. But I imagined. I built stories around him, the quiet stranger who looked like he belonged to a poem. And one day, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I tore a page from my notebook. Folded it once, then twice. Wrote something simple, stupid maybe, but real. Dear stranger. I see you every morning. You sit quietly, as if silence is a language only you speak. I like that. I didn't sign it. I couldn't. The thought made my palms sweat. But I waited, heart thrumming like a second hand on a clock, until the train reached my stop. I stood up, turned casually, and before stepping off, I slipped the letter onto his seat. I didn't look back. That night, I couldn't sleep. What had I done? What if he thought it was a joke? What if he didn't notice it at all? Or worse, what if he noticed and hated it? The next morning, I almost didn't board the train. I stood on the platform, watching the doors open like a dare. But I got in. And there he was, sitting in his usual place, the letter open in his lap. Reading it. Not tossing it. Not crumpling it. Reading. I tried not to smile. Failed. He didn't look up. But he held it like it meant something. Like it mattered. That was enough. The next letter was harder to write. Not because I didn't have things to say, I had too much, actually. 1,000 thoughts tangled up in my chest, all trying to get out at once. What if he thought the first note was a fluke? A prank? Something anonymous and meaningless? But he'd read it. That image wouldn't leave my mind, his hands holding my words like they were something delicate. He'd sat still for a long time after that, eyes on the page, unmoving. So I wrote again. Dear stranger. Do you know how rare it is to find someone who doesn't demand to be seen? Who listens with his eyes closed? This time, I folded it slower. My fingers shook. What was I doing? Pouring pieces of my heart into a stranger's morning? And yet, it felt right. Every day we shared that space, an unspoken corner of the world where words didn't matter, and glances were as loud as conversations. Still, part of me wondered if I was being foolish. If I was falling in love with a ghost. Because that's what he was, a quiet shadow with headphones and downcast eyes. And me? I was the girl scribbling secrets he didn't ask for. But writing to him made something inside me feel seen. As if in addressing him, I was also speaking to parts of myself I'd kept hidden. So I kept going. Each morning, I left a note before I stepped off the train. Folded, worded, and placed carefully on his seat. And each morning, when I snuck a look as the doors closed behind me, he was reading. One note, I told him how the rain makes the city softer, like it's apologizing for being so hard the rest of the time. Another day, I admitted I don't always know how to talk to people, but writing makes me brave in a way I don't understand. Sometimes I quoted poetry. Sometimes I just asked him to imagine something, a place where people didn't have to speak loudly to be heard. He never replied. And I didn't expect him to. But I saw the changes subtle, slow. One morning, he entered the train with a different kind of stillness, like he was looking forward to sitting down. Another day, he smiled softly before unfolding the paper. Once, our eyes nearly met. He blinked and looked away. But the moment happened. Real. Electric. I wondered if he ever imagined what I looked like when I was writing to him, if he noticed how my hands hesitated before sealing each message, how I sometimes chewed the cap of my pen when I was stuck between truth and vulnerability. Or maybe he didn't wonder at all. Maybe he just liked the mystery. Maybe he needed these notes as much as I needed to write them. We were two strangers bound by ink and silence, sharing something wordless between the spaces people usually filled with noise. And then, I did something I hadn't planned. I tore a page from my journal, scribbled a few clumsy lines, and pressed a small violet between the folds, one I'd picked from the flower stall just outside the station. Dear stranger. Some people pass like smoke. Others leave burn marks. You, I think, were a spark. Turn the page. Write back. L. I signed it, not my name, not really. Just an initial. Just L. Still anonymous. Still safe. But it felt like crossing a line. A quiet invitation, left not on his seat, but on him, pinned to the lapel of his coat while he wasn't looking. I left the train trembling. The next day, I didn't go. I didn't mean to disappear. Not like that. Not suddenly. Not after the violet. But life has a cruel sense of timing. The morning after I left that note pinned to his coat, I woke to a call. My sister was in the hospital, minor accident, nothing life-threatening, but I had to go. And once I did, everything spun too fast. Trains missed. Days blurred. I couldn't go back. Not right away. Not even after I knew she was fine. Part of me was terrified. What if he'd read my message and felt nothing? What if I'd ruined the quiet rhythm we'd built by asking for too much? It had taken all the courage I had to invite him to turn the page. To write back. And now, I'd disappeared without a word. Maybe he thought I regretted it. Maybe he thought I never existed at all. I didn't know how to fix it, how to return without unraveling the fragile thread between us. The truth was, I missed him. Not his voice, I still hadn't heard it, but his presence. The stillness of him. The way our silences fit beside each other without asking questions. Every morning I stayed away, I imagined him sitting alone on the train. Was he still coming? Did he still sit in that corner seat, waiting? Did he check his coat pocket, wondering if I'd left another note, another flower? Or had he given up? I hated not knowing. It was on the 7th day, the number I once called lucky, that I found the courage to return. But not as myself. Not fully. I watched from the far end of the platform. The train pulled in. He stepped off slowly, headphones resting around his neck, shoulders slightly more slumped than before. Still beautiful in that aching kind of way. Still silent. But in his eyes, something was missing. Me? I wanted to call out. To say, I'm here. I didn't mean to leave you behind. But I couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I did the only thing I knew how to do. I wrote. Dear stranger. I'm sorry I vanished. The world pulled me away. I didn't want to go. I don't know if you looked for me. But I kept writing. Even if you couldn't read it. Even if I was too afraid to come back. You're not just a spark anymore. You're something burning. I miss the way we never spoke. Do you miss me too? L. I folded the letter slowly, gently. I placed another violet inside. And this time, instead of leaving it on his seat, I kept it pressed in my palm, waiting for the right moment. I didn't sleep that night. The letter I'd written, the one with the violet, sat on my desk, folded and untouched. I couldn't bring myself to deliver it. What if he had already moved on? What if the silence between us was all he ever wanted? Maybe I had only been a brief, poetic moment in his quiet life, something he'd tucked away like the folded corners of an old book. I clutched the letter anyway. At 7:40 the next morning, I was back on the train. Heart pounding. Palms sweating. The carriage doors opened, and I stepped in with trembling legs, like I was walking into something sacred and fragile at once. He wasn't in his seat. My breath caught. Had I waited too long? But then, just as the train exhaled and began to move, he stepped in late, for the first time in forever. He looked different. More alert. Or maybe just aware. He walked with purpose. When he reached his seat, he looked up. At me. Directly at me. Not a glance. Not a flicker. A full moment. Eyes meeting mine like two puzzle pieces that finally figured out where they belonged. I didn't look away. Neither did he. Then he sat down, slowly, and I saw it. A letter. On my seat. My breath stilled. I blinked, uncertain, then looked at him again. He gave the smallest nod, not nervous, not bold. Just, real. I picked it up and opened it. Dear L. You speak in riddles, but I think I understand. You found me in a silence I chose. But now, I want to turn the page. Let's write something new, together. I didn't realize I was crying until a teardrop splashed softly against the page. It wasn't the words alone. It was the way he'd said L. It was the way he'd chosen to answer, not with a stare or smile or nod but with a letter. My language. He had listened. He had read every line, felt every word, and answered in kind. I folded the letter carefully and placed it inside my notebook. My fingers shook not from fear, but from wonder. From the dizzying realization that someone who never said a word had just spoken to me louder than anyone ever had. I looked up. He was watching me now, not in fear, not by accident, but with quiet intention. And then, he smiled. The smallest, softest curve of his lips. I smiled back. The next morning, I boarded the train differently. Not nervous. Not afraid. Hopeful. There was a strange kind of excitement fluttering in my chest, like my heart had discovered it was allowed to be light again. I clutched my notebook like an anchor, though I didn't need it as much today. I saw him immediately. He was already there earlier than usual, sitting in his spot by the window. When our eyes met, he didn't look away. Neither did I. I took my seat across from him and opened my notebook, pretending to write. But really, I was just steadying myself. He leaned forward slightly, rested his elbows on his knees, and then in the softest voice I'd ever heard said, "Hi." My pen stilled mid-stroke. I looked up. His voice wasn't what I imagined. It was warmer. A little raspy, like he hadn't used it much lately. Like he saved it for only the most important things. "Hi," I said back, quietly, like I didn't want to scare the moment away. He smiled, that slow, unfolding kind of smile that begins behind the eyes. He hesitated. "You can still call me stranger if you want." I laughed, a short, surprised sound that startled even me. "Do I get a name eventually?" He tilted his head. "Only if you promise not to stop writing." I wouldn't dare. We sat there for a while, surrounded by the quiet murmur of the train, the hum of tracks, the occasional cough, the world waking up around us, and none of it touched us. "I didn't know how to reply," he said finally. "I wanted to, but I wasn't sure I'd get it right." "You did," I whispered. "You did." Silence settled again, but not the kind we used to share. This one felt open, comfortable. He pulled something from his coat pocket. My violet. Pressed, carefully kept between a folded square of wax paper. I didn't know if it meant goodbye or something else, he said. "It meant don't forget me," I said. "But I hoped it would mean find me again." He nodded, folding the paper gently before slipping it back into his pocket. "I'm glad you came back." "So am I." From that day on, we still sat in silence. But it wasn't the same kind. Now, sometimes, we talked. Sometimes, we shared music through tangled headphone wires. Other times, we still exchanged letters, not because we had to, but because we wanted to. There was something sacred in writing things we couldn't quite say out loud. I learned his name. He learned mine. I told him about the night I almost didn't get on the train. He told me about how the letters had become the best part of his mornings. He said, "You made me feel seen." And I said, "So did you." It wasn't a love story at first. It was two people brushing shoulders with fate, two people who shared the same silence until it started to mean something. But eventually, it became love. Slow, steady, surprising. Not the kind that shouts from rooftops, but the kind that folds notes on train seats and presses violets into coats and watches each other when no one else is looking. Weeks later, on a morning when spring had started to whisper through the city, he sat beside me instead of across. We watched the window together. No more letters between us. Just the sound of the train, and the soft warmth of his hand brushing against mine, fingers curling slowly like he was still asking permission, even after all this time. I laced mine through his. And he whispered, "You turned the page." I looked at him and smiled. "Now let's write the rest." If this story moved you even a little, please like or comment, it helps more people find it. Subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss a love story whispered just for you. We're building something special here, a space for stories that speak to the soul. I'm so glad you're part of it.